Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is the secret doctrine we are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the secret doctrine with the origin of the satanic myth. Now, before we even begin, I'm going to point out that I do not believe that there is a literal Satan who is in direct opposition to God, right? Satan is the search for enlightenment. It is the wisdom and knowledge of growth at worst. There is no corporeal entity that is in direct opposition and co-equal to the creator of all things. And if any of that is unfamiliar to you or confusing, you should check out the Bible study. Now, let us then fathom this creation of the patristic fancy still deeper and find its prototype with the pagans. The origin of the new satanic myth is easy to trace. The tradition of the dragon and the sun is echoed in every part of the world, both in its civilized and semi-savage regions. It took rise in the whisperings about secret initiations among the profane and was established universally through the once universal heliolatrous religion. But that's like cheating on the sun, right? Heliolatrous. There was a time when the four parts of the world were covered with the temples sacred to the sun and the dragon. But the cult is now preserved mostly in China and in the Buddhist countries. Bel and the dragon being uniformly coupled together, and the priest of the Ophite religion as uniformly assuming the name of his god. Archaeology. In the religions of the past, it is Egypt we have to seek for its Western origin. The Ophites adopted their rites from Hermes Trismegistus, and Heliolatrous worship crossed over with its sun gods into the land of the pharaohs from India. In the gods of Stonehenge, we recognize the divinities of Delphi and Babylon. As far as I am aware, there is no god associated with Stonehenge, right? I could be wrong. Again, this is not something that I am an expert in, but I do have a little bit of knowledge about. I've even done a video on Stonehenge. And as far as I am aware, there is no record of any god. Now, it can be an astronomical observation point. That is the most likely. It can be a place for ceremonial worship of nature. Again, very likely. Much less likely that it is an anthropomorphized god's location for worship. For a variety of reasons, but most importantly because that was not the Celtic tradition. We recognize the divinities of Delphi and Babylon. Right? That is, again, simply not true. And in those of the latter, the devas of the Vedic nations. Bel and the dragon, Apollo and Python, Krishna and Kalia, Osiris and Typhon are all one under many names. The latest of which are Michael and the red dragon, and St. George and his dragon. As Michael is, as one god, or his double for terrestrial purposes, and is one of the Elohim, the fighting angel, he is thus simply a permutation of Jehovah, and so you should not be trying to reach him. Whatever the cosmic or astronomical event that first gave rise to the allegory of the War of Heaven, its earthly origin has to be sought in the temples of initiation and archaic crypts. The following are the proofs. We find A. The priest assuming the name of the gods they served. B. The dragons, held throughout all antiquity as the symbol of immortality and wisdom, of secret knowledge, and of eternity. And C. The hierophants of Egypt, of Babylon, and India, styling themselves, generally, the sons of the dragon and serpents. Thus, the teachings of the secret doctrine are thereby corroborated. That is a chain of logic, but it is not necessarily a true chain of logic. It can be. Now, I have a different interpretation of the dragons, right? There are two possibilities for this. One is that it was remnants of the dinosaurs. I know some people are going to say that that is impossible, but we still have remnants of the dinosaurs today. It is entirely possible that some of them survived the mass extinction event. However long that happened to have been, I do not know or claim to know. But it is a possibility that can be, right? There are pictures, right? Cave drawings of man and some of these Jurassic, well, I don't want to say Jurassic because I'm not positive on what time period it would have been, the particular the species would have been, but there are pictures of men and dinosaurs together, and that intimates that at least at some point in time they had some knowledge thereof, and a dragon would very much resemble a dinosaur or vice versa. The other option is, as we discuss in the 12,000 year disaster cycle, that there is a sign in the sky that is sinuous and resembles a snake or a dragon. It is probably red, and therefore it is the great fiery dragon of old. Right? That dragon almost certainly affected change on this planet. Now, it is entirely possible that this dragon was the thing that gave us the capacity to not be the fourth dimensional animals anymore, right? To rise to the fifth. Macroevolution doesn't work unless there's this whole planet-wide change that could happen, and that could have been the catalyst for that. It is possible that that was the thing that hit Jupiter. Was it Jupiter or Saturn? It's got the gash in it, right? That's entirely possible. It is also entirely possible that it hit us at one point, the Tiamat legend, and formed the moon. All of those things are possibilities, not saying that they are exactly true, but they make more sense than some of this. And again, if that is confusing to you, the 12,000 year disaster cycle we talk about in extensive detail. Back to the text. There were numerous catacombs in Egypt and Chaldea, some of them of a very vast extent. The most renowned of them were the subterranean crypts of Thebes and Memphis. The former, beginning on the western side of the Nile, extended towards the Libyan desert and were known as the Serpents' Catacombs or Passages. It was there that were performed the sacred mysteries of the Kukulus Angakis, the unavoidable cycle, more generally known as the circle of necessity, the inexorable doom imposed upon every soul after the bodily death, and when it has been judged in the Amentian region. And again, that is not something that I believe in. And that is confusing. See the Bible study, right? Heaven and hell are not a thing in the Old Testament at all. There is zero reference to either heaven or hell. That is entirely a New Testament era construction. It was not a thing then. And so to base a new religion upon something that did not even exist in the old religion is beyond ridiculous. Back to the text. In de Boerbourg's book, Votan, the Mexican demigod, in narrating his expedition, describes a subterranean passage which ran underground and terminated at the root of the heavens, adding that this passage was a snake's hole, un agujero de culebra, and that he was admitted to it because he was himself a son of the snakes, or a serpent. This is indeed very suggestive, for his description of the snake's hole is that of the ancient Egyptian crypt, as above mentioned. The hierophants, moreover, of Egypt, as of Babylon, generally styled themselves the sons of the serpent god, or sons of the dragon, during the mysteries. On a separate note, if you would like to have more information about a lot of mysteries, you should check out the Brothers of the Serpent podcast. No relation whatsoever. There is no bearing whatsoever. Those of you who know. The Assyrian priest bore always the name of this god, says Movers. The Druids of the Celto-Britannic regions also called themselves snakes. I am a serpent, I am a Druid, they exclaimed. Says who? The Egyptian Karnak is twin brother to the Karnak of Bretagne, the later Karnak, meaning the serpent's mount. When I was talking about Karnak and the Trilithon stones the other day, I was talking about the Egyptian Karnak. I was not talking about the Britain Karnak. The Dragontina once covered the surface of the globe, and these temples were sacred to the dragon only because it was the symbol of the sun, which, in its turn, was the symbol of the highest god, the Phoenician Elon, or Elion, whom Abraham recognized as El Elion. Footnote. See St. Caniathon in Eusebius. From Genesis 14. I would have to go back and look at that reference, but I do not remember that. There was a lot about Abram, right? There's a lot about Abram that is just factually not intelligent, right? You cannot follow the story of Abram and think that that's the God to follow. I do not understand that. Right? Not if you read it, right? Bible study. Besides the surname of serpents, they were called the builders, the architects. For the immense grandeur of their temples and monuments was such that even now the pulverized remains of them frighten the mathematical calculations of our modern engineers, says Taliesin. Footnote 2. Society of Antiquaries of London. De Boerberg hints that the chiefs of the name of Wotan, the Quetzalcoatl, or serpent deity of the Mexicans, are the descendants of Ham and Canaan. Bruh, you're killing me. I am Hivim, they say. Being a Hivim, I am of the great race of the dragon. I am a snake myself, for I am a Hivim. So that's Ham and Canaan, you say. Furthermore, the war in heaven is shown, in one of its significations, to have meant and referred to those terrible struggles in store for the candidate for adeptship between himself and his magic, and his, by magic, personified human passions, when the inner, enlightened man had to either slay them or fail. In the former case, he became the dragon slayer, as having happily overcome all the temptations, and a son of the serpent, and a serpent himself, having cast off his old skin, and being born new, in a new body, becoming a son of wisdom and immortality in eternity. See Part 2 on the Satanic Myth. Seth, the reputed forefather of Israel, is only a Jewish travesty of Hermes, the god of wisdom, also called Tehoti, Tat, Seth, Set, and Satan. He is also Typhon, the name the same as Apophis, the dragon slain by Horus. For Typhon was also called Set. He is simply the dark side of Osiris, his brother, as Angra Mainyu is the black shadow of Ahura Mazda. Terrestrially, all these allegories were connected with the trials of adeptship and initiation. Astronomically, they refer to the solar and lunar eclipses, the mythical explanations of which we find to this day in India and Ceylon, where anyone can study the allegorical narratives and traditions which have remained unchanged for many thousands of years. Rehu, mythologically, is a Daitya, a giant, a demigod, the lower part of whose body ended in a dragon or serpent's tail. During the churning of the ocean, when the gods produced Amrita, the water of immortality, he stole some of it, and drinking became immortal. The sun and moon, who had detected him in his theft, denounced him to Vishnu, who placed him in the stellar spheres, the upper portion of his body representing the dragon's head, and the lower, Ketu, the dragon's tail, the two being the ascending and descending nodes. Since then, Rahu wreaks his vengeance on the sun and moon by occasionally swallowing them. But this fable had another mystic meaning, since Rahu, the dragon's head, played a prominent part in the mysteries of the sun's Vikaratana's initiation, when the candidate and the dragon had a supreme fight. The caves of the Rishis, the abodes of the Teresians and the Greek seers, were modeled on those of the Nagas, the Hindu king snakes, who dwelt in cavities of the rocks under the ground. From Sesha, the thousand-headed serpent, upon which Vishnu rests, down to Python, the dragon serpent oracle, all points to the secret meaning of the myth. In India, we find the fact mentioned in the earliest Puranas. The children of Sarasa are the mighty dragons, the Vayu Purana replacing Sarasa of Vishnu Purana by Danayas or Danavas, the descendants of Danu by the sage Kasyapa, and those Danavas being the giants or titans who warred against the gods. They are thus shown identical with the dragons and serpents of wisdom. By simply comparing the sun gods of every country, one may find their allegories agreeing perfectly with one another, and the more the allegorical symbol is a cult, the more its corresponding symbol in other systems agrees with it. Thus, if from three systems widely differing from each other in appearance, the old Aryan, the ancient Greek, and the modern Christian schemes, we select several sun gods and dragons at random, these will be found copied from each other. Let us take Agni, the fire god, Indra, the firmament, and Kartikeya from the Hindus, the Greek Apollo, and Michael, the angel of the sun, the first of the eons, called by the Gnostics the Savior, and proceed in order. Agni, the fire god, is called in the Rig Veda Vayaswanara. Now, Vayaswanara is a Danava, a giant demon. Footnote, he is thus named and included in the list of the Danavas in Vayu Purana. The commentator of Bhagavata Purana calls him a son of Danu, but the name means also spirit of humanity. A giant demon, whose daughters, Paloma and Kalaka, are the mothers of numberless Danavas, 30 millions, that's not numberless, by Kasyapa. Footnote. Kasyapa is called the son of Brahma, and is the self-born, to whom a great part of the work of creation is attributed. He is one of the 7 rishis, exoterically the son of Marichi, the son of Brahma, while Atharva Veda says, the self-born Kasyapa sprang from time, and esoterically, time and space are forms of the one unrecognizable deity. It is important to note that the representation of time is going to be logos, right? We have explained that several times, but you have God who is infinite. You have the Spirit, which is God defined and therefore finite. Spirit is all things. All things in stasis is the beginning, right? It is not moving. The logos is spirit in motion. It is every single instance of fire, light, life, or movement. Every single instance of that, whether it is as simple as changing your mind, all movement is logos. Therefore, this is a representation of logos, not a deity, right? Not because deity is a big word, right? God, the infinite, is the deity. Spirit, the finite, is not the deity. It is the representation of the deity in finity, in the finite world, right? It is not the infinite, but rather the infinite defined. And so it is not the deity itself, it is the representation of the deity. Anthropomorphized if you wish, but you don't have to put a face on the spirit any more than you have to put the face on the words coming out of my mouth. And so to me, all of these representations of the fire god or light are going to be representations of logos. Back to the text. As an Aditya, Indra is the son of Kasyapa, as also Vayavasvata Manu, our progenitor. In the instance given in the text, he is Kasyapa Aditya, the sun, and the sun god, from whom all the cosmic demons, dragons, nagas, serpents, or snake gods, and danavas, and giants are born. The meaning of the allegories given above is purely astronomical and cosmical, but will prove to identity of all. The name means also Kasyapa, and live in Hiranyapura, the golden city, floating in the air. Therefore, Indra is, in a fashion, the stepson of these two as a son of Kasyapa. And Kasyapa is, in this sense, identical with Agni, the fire god or sun, Kasyapa Aditya. To this same group belongs Skanda or Kartikeya, the god of war, the 6-faced planet Mars, astronomically. a Kumara or virgin youth born of Agni. Footnote 2. All such stories refer to the exoteric text. In the Mahabharata, Kartikeya, the six-faced Mars, is the son of Rudra or Siva, self-born without a mother from the seed of Siva cast into the fire, but Kartikeya is generally called Agnibihu, fireborn. Born of Agni for the purpose of destroying Taraka and the Nava demon, the grandson of Kashyapa by Hiranyaksha, his son. Footnote 3. Hiranyaksha is the ruler or king of the fifth region of Patala, a snake god. His son, whose, Taraka's, yogi austerities were so extraordinary that while they became formidable to the gods, who feared such a rival in power. Footnote 4. The Elohim also feared the knowledge of God of good and evil for Adam, and therefore are shown as expelling him from Eden or killing him spiritually. Alright. While Indra, the bright god of the firmament, kills Vrita, or Ahi, the serpent demon, for which feat he is called Vritrahan, the destroyer of Vritra. He also leads the host of Devas, angels or gods, against other gods who rebel against Brahma, for which he is entitled Jishnu, leader of the celestial host. Kartikeya is found bearing the same titles. For killing Taraka, the Danava, he is Tarakajit, vanquisher of Taraka. Footnote 5. The story told is that Taraka, also called Kalabahana, owing to his extraordinary yoga powers, had obtained all the divine knowledge of yoga vidya and occult powers of the gods, who conspired against him. Here we see the obedient host of archangels, or minor gods, conspiring against the future fallen angels, whom Enoch accuses of the great crime of disclosing to the world all the secret things done in heaven. It is Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Sergal, and Uriel who denounced to the Lord God those of their brethren, who were said to have pried into the divine mysteries and taught them to men. By this means they themselves escaped a like punishment. Michael was commissioned to fight the dragon, and so was Kartikeya, and under the same circumstances. Both are leaders of the celestial host, both virgins, both leaders of saints, spear holders, Sakitithara, etc., etc. Kartikeya is the original of Michael and St. George, as surely as Indra is the prototype of Kartikeya. Vanquisher of Taraka, Kumara Guha, the mysterious virgin youth, Siddha Sena, the leader of the Siddhas, and Saktidhara, spear holder. 2. Now take Apollo, the Grecian sun god, by appearing the mythical accounts given of him. See whether he does not answer both to Indra, Kartikeya, and even Kasyapa Aditya, and at the same time to Michael as the angelic form of Jehovah, the angel of the sun, who is like and one with God. Later ingenious interpretations for monotheistic purposes, elevated though they be into not to be questioned church dogmas, prove nothing except the abuse of human authority and power, perhaps. Apollo is Helios, the sun. Phoebus, Apollo, the light of life and of the world. Footnote 1. The light and life of the material physical world, the delight of the senses, not of the soul. Apollo is preeminently the human god, the god of emotional, pomp-loving, and theatrical church ritualism with lights and music. That is an opinion. The light and life of the world, who arises out of the golden winged cup, the sun. Hence, he is the sun god par excellence. At the moment of his birth, he asked for his bow to kill Python, the demon dragon, who attacked his mother before his birth. Footnote 2. See Chapter 12 in Revelation, where we find Apollo's mother persecuted by that Python, the red dragon, who is also Porphyrion, the scarlet or red tyrant. That is certainly an interpretation that you can make. I do not make that same interpretation, simply because I'm not trying to force it, right? If you read through, it tells you exactly what that represents. We have done an unconventional look at Revelation. You're more than welcome to check that out. It is part of the Bible study, and it's its own playlist. Attacked his mother before his birth, and whom he is divinely commissioned to destroy, like Kartatakea, who is born for the purpose of killing Taraka, the too holy and wise demon. Apollo was born on a sidereal island called Asteria, the Golden Star Island, the earth which floats in the air, which is the Hindu golden Hiranyapura. He is called the pure Agnos Dei, the Indian Agni, as Dr. Kennelly thinks, and in the primal myth he is exempt from all sensual love. He is, therefore, a Kumara, like Kartatakea, and as Indira was in his earlier life and biographies. Python, moreover, the red dragon, connects Apollo with Michael, who fights the apocalyptic dragon, who wants to attack the woman in childbirth. See Revelation. As Python attacks Apollo's mother, can anyone fail to see the identity? Had the retired Honorable W.E. Gladstone, who prides himself on his Greek scholarship and understanding of the spirit of Homer's allegories, ever had a real inkling of the esoteric meaning of the Iliad and the Odyssey? We are reading the Iliad. We are about to start the Odyssey. We got 4 chapters left in the Iliad. He would have understood St. John's Revelation and even the Pentateuch better than he does. For the way to the Bible lies through Hermes, Bel, and Homer, as the way to these is through the Hindu and Chaldean religious symbols. The repetition of this archaic tradition is found in chapter 12 of St. John's Revelations and comes from the Babylonian legends without the smallest doubt. We have done an entire video on Revelation 12. You are more than welcome to check that out. Though the Babylonian story had its origin in the allegories of the Aryans, the fragment read by the late George Smith, see the Chaldean account of Genesis, is sufficient to disclose the source of the 12th chapter of the Apocalypse. Here it is given by the eminent Assyriologist. Our fragment refers to the creation of mankind, called Adam, as the man in the Bible. He is made perfect, but afterwards joins with the dragon of the deep, the animal of Tiamat, the spirit of chaos, and offends against his God, who curses him, and calls down on his head all of the evils and troubles of humanity. Footnote. No God, who curses his supposed own work because he has made it imperfect, can be the one infinite absolute wisdom, whether called Bel or Jehovah. I absolutely agree with that. If you were unfamiliar, we have done a Bible study, right? I've mentioned it, 4 times now. In Genesis and Exodus, you can definitely find out a lot about this, right? God is completely flummoxed repeatedly by the actions of men. It is completely outside of his scope of understanding that men have minds of their own. God cannot understand that according to the Bible, and that should be a problem for you if you believe the Bible. But it's not. You will apologize for it. I don't know why, but you will. Back to the text. This is followed by a war between the dragon and the powers of evil, or chaos, on one side and the gods on the other. The gods have weapons forged for them. Footnote 2. In the Indian allegory of Tarakamaya, the war between the gods and the Asuras, headed by Soma, the moon, the king of plants, it is Viswakarma, the artificer of the god, who forges, like Vulcan, Tubal-Cain, their weapons for them. The gods have weapons forged for them, and Merodach, the archangel Michael in Revelation, undertakes to lead the heavenly host against the dragons. The war, which is described with spirit, ends, of course, in the triumph of the principles of good. Footnote 3. We have said elsewhere that the woman with child of Revelation was Amy, the great mother, or Bina, the third Sephiroth, whose name is Jehovah, and the dragon, who seeks to devour her coming child, the universe, is the dragon of absolute wisdom, that wisdom which, recognizing the non-separateness of the universe and everything in it from the absolute all, sees in it no better than the great illusion, Mahamaya, hence the cause of misery and suffering. That is a victim mentality mindset. This war of the gods with the powers of the deep refers also, in the last and terrestrial application, to the struggle between the Aryan adepts and the nascent fifth race and the sorcerers of Atlantis, the demons of the deep, the islanders surrounded with water who disappeared in the deluge. And I guess we're back to Atlantis being an island. Like last chapter, it was a continent. This chapter, it's an island again. And yes, I do know a continent can be an island, but that is not the point of that particular point out. The symbols of the dragon and war in heaven have, as already stated, more than one significance. And that is true, right? I believe the 12,000 year disaster cycle is a thing. I believe that there will be a sign in the heavens. I believe that that sign will resemble the red dragon. And I believe it will do war with the things in heaven, right? It will cause the sky to roll back. We will have problems with the atmosphere. We talk about that there. We won't be able to see the stars. They will fall to heaven. There will be great conflict in the sky. It will probably is a big word. It will possibly strike another one of the planets, as it is possibly done several times before. Changing great things in our heavens once again, as it probably has before. And if any of that is confusing to you, again, see the 12,000 year disaster cycle where I talk about it for an hour. Religious, astronomical, and geological events being included in the one common allegory. That would be my allegory. But it had also a cosmological meaning. In India, the dragon story is repeated in one of its forms in the Battle of Indra with Vritra. In the Vedas, this Ahivritra is referred to as the demon of drought, a terrible hot wind. Indra is shown to be constantly at war with him, and with the help of his thunder and lightning, the god compels Ahivrita to pour down in rain on earth and then slays him. Hence, Indra is called the Vritrahan, the slayer of Vritra, as Michael is called the conqueror and slayer of the dragon. Both these enemies are then the old dragon precipitated into the depths of the earth in this one sense. Now, imagine, if you will, that there were indeed people on this planet when it was struck by this dragon, right? My speculations are that this is a thing that happened. It is speculative, it is based upon science, but it is not conclusive. I believe that we were struck at one point, that we were Tiamat, this planet. That on the other side of being struck, a large chunk was cast off into space, which became the moon. There is a significant portion of the earth missing where it could have been stricken. It's called the Gulf of Mexico. There are reasons why I believe that as well. That is a possibility, right? It tore off a large chunk and made it smaller, right? So, if that is possible, there were witnesses here. That is still possible. And the earth reformed and healed itself. That striking would look like what? Like the dragon being cast down to earth and being put into the pit of hell? Would that be something? I bet it would. I bet it would resemble that to the people who were there to witness it. Now, again, that is speculatory, but it does account for this legend of being cast from the heavens into the pit of the earth. Because I'm here to tell you, hell is not in the center of the earth. It never was. That was not an existent thing in the source documentation. There is the underworld, but that's not even the center of the earth. That was just like cave systems and stuff. So, back to the text. The Zendavestic Amashapins are a host with a leader like Saint Michael over them, and seem identical with the legions of heaven when one reads the Vendadad. Thus, in Fargard 19:2-13, Zarathustra is told by Ahura Mazda to invoke the Amisha Spinta who rule over the 7 Kashavaris. Footnote 4. The 7 Kashavaris of the earth, the 7 spheres of our planetary chain, that would be 2 different fucking things. The 7 worlds, also mentioned in the Rig Veda, are fully referred to elsewhere. There are 6 Rajamasi worlds above Prithvi, the earth, or this Idam, as opposed to that which is yonder, the 6 globes on the 3 other planes. See Rig Veda 1. We have not done the Rig Veda, so I cannot talk about that with any extensity. But who roll over the 7 Kashvares of the earth, which Kashvares in their 7 applications refer equally to the 7 spheres of our planetary chain, to the 7 planets, the 7 heavens, etc., according to whether the sense is applied in a physical, supra-mundane, or simply a sidereal world. In the same Fargard, in his invocation against Angramanyu and his host, Zarathustra appeals to them in these words: I invoke the 7 bright Sarava and their sons and their flocks, 42 Vindadad Sad. The Sarava, a word which the Orientalists have given up as one of unknown meaning, means the same Amashapins, but in their highest occult meaning. The Sarava are the noumeni of the phenomenal Amashapins, the souls or spirits of those manifested powers, and their sons and their flocks refers to the planetary angels and their sidereal flock of stars and constellations. Amshashapin is the exoteric term used in terrestrial combinations and affairs only. Zarathustra addressed Ahura Mazda constantly as Thou, Thou, the maker of the material world. Ormazd is the father of our earth, Spenta Armaiti, and she is referred to when personified as the fair daughter of Ahura Mazda, Fargard 19, who is also the creator of the tree of occult and spiritual knowledge and wisdom, from which the mystic and mysterious charisma is taken. But the occult name of the bright god was never pronounced outside of the temple. Samael, or Satan, the seducing serpent of Genesis, and one of the primeval angels who rebelled, is the name of the red dragon. He is the angel of death, the Talmud saying that the angel of death and Satan are the same, and, killed by Michael, he is once more killed by St. George, who is also a dragon slayer. But see the transformations of this. Samael is identical with the Samum, the hot wind of the desert, or again with the Vedic demon of drought, as Varuta. Samum is called Atabutos, or Diabolus, the devil. Typhon, or the dragon Apophis, the accuser in the Book of the Dead, is worsted by Horus, who pierces his opponent's head with a spear. And Typhon is the all-destroying wind of the desert, the rebellious element that throws everything into confusion. As Set, he is the darkness of night, the murderer of Osiris, who is in the light of day and sun. Archaeology demonstrates that Horus is identical with Anubis. Footnote. Verse 62, chapter 17, Book of the Dead. Anubis is Horus, who melts in him who is eyeless. Archaeology demonstrates that Horus is identical with Anubis, whose effigy was discovered upon an Egyptian monument with a cuirass and spear, like St. Michael and St. George. Anubis is also represented as slaying a dragon that has the head and tail of a serpent. C'est la noix du dragon des myths. Cosmologically, then, all the dragons and serpents conquered by their slayers are, in their origin, the turbulent, confused principles and chaos brought to order by the sun gods or creative powers. In the Book of the Dead, those principles are called the Sons of the Rebellion. See also Egyptian Pantheon. In that night, the oppressor, the murderer of Osiris, otherwise called the deceiving serpent, calls the Sons of Rebellion in air, and when they arrive to the east of heavens, then there is war in heaven and in the entire world. And again, 12,000 year disaster cycle. And if that dragon hit Saturn, then that would be this. If there were witnesses to it, and there may have been. In the Scandinavian Eddas, the war of the Aces with the Hrimthuses, frost giants, and of Asathor with the Jotuns, the serpents and dragons, and the wolf who comes out of darkness, is the repetition of the same myth. I wonder why. 12,000 year disaster cycle. The evil spirits, footnote 1. These evil spirits can by no means be identified with Satan or the great dragon. They are the elementals generated or begotten by ignorance, cosmic and human passions, or chaos. The evil spirits, having begun by being simply the emblems of chaos, became ehumerized by the superstition of the rabble, until they have finally won the right of citizenship in the most civilized and learned races of the globe, since its creation is alleged, and become a dogma with Christians. As George Smith has it, the evil principles, spirits, emblems of chaos, in Chaldea and Assyria as in Egypt we see, resist this change and make war on the moon, the eldest son of Bel, drawing over to their side the sun, Venus, and the atmospheric god Vul. Assyrian discoveries. Again, 12,000 year disaster cycle. This is only another version of the Hindu war in heaven between Soma, the moon, and the gods, Indra being the atmospheric Vul, which shows it plainly to be both a cosmogonical and an astronomical allegory, woven into and drawn from the earliest theogony as taught in the mysteries. Or maybe it wasn't an allegory. It is in the religious doctrines of the Gnostics that the real meaning of the dragon, the serpent, the goat, and all of those symbols of power now called evil can be seen the best, as it is they who divulge the esoteric nature of Jewish substitute for Ein Sof in their teachings, of the true meaning of which, while the rabbins concealed it, the Christians, with few exceptions, knew nothing. Surely Jesus of Nazareth would have hardly advised his apostles to show themselves as wise as the serpent, had the latter been a symbol of the evil one, nor would the Ophites, the learned Egyptian Gnostics of the Brotherhood of the Serpent, have reverenced a living snake in all of their ceremonies as the emblem of wisdom, the divine Sophia, and a type of the all-good, not the all-bad. Were that reptile so closely connected with Satan? The fact is that even as a common Ophidian, it has ever been a dual symbol, and as a dragon, it has never been anything else than a symbol of the manifested deity in its great wisdom. I disagree with that. The Draco volans, the flying dragon of the early painters, may be an exaggerated picture of the real extinct antediluvian animal, but those who have faith in the occult teachings believe that in the days of old there were such creatures as flying dragons, or a kind of pterodactyl, and that it is those gigantic winged lizards that served as the prototypes of the seraph of Moses and his great brazen serpent. There is no reason to believe that the brazen serpent was a pterodactyl. Footnote. See Numbers 21, 8-9. God orders Moses to build a brazen serpent, seraph, to look upon which heals those bitten by the fiery serpents. The latter were the seraphim, each of which, as Isaiah shows, had 6 wings. They are the symbols of Jehovah and of all the other demiurgi who produce out of themselves 6 sons or likenesses, 7 with their creator. Thus, the brazen serpent is Jehovah, the chief of the fiery serpents. And yet in 2 Kings, it is shown that King Hezekiah, who, like as David his father, did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, break in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made and called it Nehushtan, or piece of brass. It is important to note that in no way, shape, or form did David do that which was right in the sight of the Lord. The Jews had worshipped the latter idol themselves, but after the religious reforms brought about by Hezekiah turned round and called that symbol of the great or higher God of every other nation a devil, and their own usurper, the one God. Footnote 2. And Satan stood up against Israel, and moved David to number Israel. The anger of the Lord Jehovah was kindled against Israel, and he moved David to say, Go number Israel. The two are then identical. Once again, I will point out that David in no way, shape, or form did what God would want him to do. And if that is unfamiliar with you, I refer you to Kings and Chronicles, where we talk about it in extreme detail. David was a horrible, horrible fucking human being, with no remorse all the way up to the point of death. The appellation Satan, in Hebrew Satan, an adversary from the verb shatana, to be adverse, to persecute, belongs by right to the first and cruelest adversary of all the other gods, Jehovah, not to the serpent, who spoke only words of sympathy and wisdom, and is at the worst, even in the dogma, the adversary of men. This dogma, based as it is on chapter 3 of Genesis, is as illogical and unjust as it is paradoxical. For who was the first to create that original and henceforward universal temper of man? The woman? Not the serpent, surely, but the Lord God himself, who, saying, "It is not good that man should be alone," made woman, and brought her unto the man. If the unpleasant little incident that followed was and is still to be regarded as the original sin, then it exhibits the Creator's divine foresight in a poor light indeed. That is absolutely true, right? God created man, put him in the middle of this garden with this tree, and then knew full well that this tree would be there, and was completely flummoxed by the fact that this man, who cannot think, would eat from the fruit of the tree. That is poor planning on the part of God at the very least. And if God's a poor planner, then we got a big problem. Right? Don't anthropomorphize your deity. It would have been far better for the first Adam of chapter 1 to have been left either male and female or alone. It is the Lord God, evidently, who is the real cause of all the mischief, the agent provocateur, and the serpent only a prototype of Azazel, the scapegoat for the sin of the God of Israel. The poor Tragos having to pay the penalty for his master and creator's blunder. This, of course, is addressed only to those who accept the opening events of the drama of humanity in Genesis in their dead-letter sense. Those who read them esoterically are not reduced to fanciful speculations and hypotheses. I beg to differ. They know how to read the symbolism therein contained and cannot err. Boy, that is a heady statement. You can't make a mistake? Bet. There is at present no need to touch upon the mystic and manifold meaning of the name Jehovah in its abstract sense. We have done that repeatedly. One independent of the deity falsely called by that name. It was a blind, created purposely by the rabbins, a secret preserved by them with tenfold care after the Christians had despoiled them of this God name, which was their own property. Footnote. Dozens of the most erudite writers have sifted through the various meanings of the name Jehovah, with and without the Masoretic points, and shown their multifarious bearings. The best of such works is The Source of Measures, the Hebrew-Egyptian mystery. I would like to... Y'all remind me to look that up. Never mind, y'all aren't going to remind me. I'm going to go ahead and do this. We will pop out this and come right back here. Bam! I'll look that up later. All right, where was footnote 1? Right here. But the following statement is made. The personage who is named, simply named in the first 4 chapters of Genesis, variously as God, the Lord God, and Lord, simply is not one and the same person. Certainly is not Jehovah. There are 3 distinct classes or groups of the Elohim called Sephiroth in the Kabbalah. Jehovah appearing only in chapter 4, in the first verse of which he is named Cain, and in the last transformed into mankind, male and female, Yahweh. Footnote 2. In the above-mentioned work, page 223, verse 26 of the 4th chapter of Genesis is correctly translated. The men begin to call themselves Jehovah, but less correctly explained, perhaps, as the last word ought to be written Yah, male, Hovah, female, to show that from that time the race was distinctly separate. Man and woman began. The serpent, moreover, is not Satan, but the bright angel, one of the Elohim clothed in radiance and glory, who, promising the woman that if they ate of the forbidden fruit, ye shall not surely die, kept his promise, and made man immortal in his incorruptible nature. He is the Io of the mysteries, the chief of the androgyne creators of men. Chapter 3 contains, esoterically, the withdrawal of the veil of ignorance that closed the perceptions of the angelic man, made in the image of the boneless gods, and the opening of his consciousness to his real nature, thus showing the bright angel, Lucifer, in the light of the giver of immortality and as the enlightener, while the real fall into generation and matter is to be sought in chapter 4. Therefore, Jehovah Cain, the male part of Adam, the dual man, having separated himself from Eve, creates in her Abel, the first natural woman. Let's check out this footnote. Dozens of the most erudite writers have sifted through the various meanings of the name Jehovah. In the above-mentioned, right here. See for explanation the excellent pages of Appendix 7 of the same work. This is the wrong stars. That's what it is. Now, there is no reason whatsoever to believe that Abel was female, right? That is something that, the first natural woman, and sheds the virgin blood. Again, there is no reason to believe that that is right. There is many problems with the story of Cain and Abel, right? It is an allegory for many things, but it can only be taken allegorically, right? There are many reasons to have problems with it. The first being, of course, that they were not allowed to eat meat. That was not a thing in Genesis, right at the beginning. It was not until Noah survived the flood, left the ship, which he packed with, well, we get to that, which he filled the ship with these clean and unclean animals, which, by the way, there was no law, so there was no clean or unclean animals. He packed it full of them, and then when he got off he made an offering, and then an angel came down and said, "Oh, you did great. Go out, be a steward of the earth, repopulate, take no blood or shed no blood of man. Oh, and by the way, now you can eat meat." Right? That is quite literally how it happened. So if you are taking the Bible as authority, this is the incontrovertible word of God. It is quite literally contradicting itself entirely throughout the whole book of Genesis is a bunch of contradictions. That's not even getting into the fact that Abram was a equally horrible person to David, right? The patriarchs in general, absolutely shit humans, completely terrible people. And so you can take those as an example as you want. I absolutely will not. But there's no reason to believe that Cain was a female, right? That is not in the text. It's just simply not there. That I am fairly positive about. Back to the text. Now, Cain, being shown identical with Jehovah on the authority of the correct reading of verse 1, in the original Hebrew text, the rabbins teach that Cain, the evil, was the son of Eve by Samael, the devil who took Adam's place, and the Talmud adding that the evil spirit, Satan, and Samael, the angel of death, are the same. It becomes easy to see that Jehovah, mankind, or Yahovah, and Satan, therefore the tempting serpent, are one and the same in every particular. There is no devil, no evil outside mankind to produce a devil. Evil is a necessity in and one of the supporters of the manifested universe. It is a necessity for progress and evolution, as night is necessary for the production of day, and death for that of life, that man may live forever. Satan represents metaphysically simply the reverse or the polar opposite of everything in nature. Footnote. In demonology, Satan is the leader of the opposition in hell, a monarch of which was Beelzebub. He belongs to the fifth kind or class of demons, of which there are 9 according to medieval demonology, and he is at the head of witches and sorcerers. But see in the text the true meaning of Baphomet, the goat-headed Satan, one with Azazel, the scapegoat of Israel, nature, is the god Pan. The polar opposite of everything in nature would be uncreation, by the way. Not evil, right? Evil is a necessity. Evil is only defined by relativity. I mean, we, as humans, have decided that murdering someone is evil. That is a relative thing, because if you look in the animal kingdom, that is not necessarily a thing. And so the understanding that it is a bad thing to take the life of someone similar to you is not a representation of evil. He is the adversary, allegorically the murderer, and the great enemy of all, because there is nothing in the whole universe that has not two sides. That is one of the laws of creation. The reverses of the same metal. We talk about that quite often. Quite a lot. We talk about that quite a lot. Them two coins, right? Yes or no, A or B, virtue, vice. Yeah. But in that case, light, goodness, beauty, etc., may be called Satan with as much propriety as the devil, since they are the adversaries of darkness, badness, and ugliness. Darkness, badness, and ugliness are relative terms as well. And now the philosophy and the rationale of certain early Christian sects, called heretical and viewed as the abomination of the times, will become more comprehensible. We may understand how it was that the sect of Satanians came to be degraded and were anathemized without any hope of vindication in a future day, since they kept their tenets secret. How, on the same principle, the Cainites came to be degraded, and even the Judas Iscariotes, the true characters of the treacherous apostle, having never been correctly presented before the tribunal of humanity. Was he really treacherous if he was doing what was required to be done? As a direct consequence, the tenets of the Gnostic sects also become clear. Each of these sects was founded by an initiate, while their tenets were based on the correct knowledge of the symbolism of every nation. Thus, it becomes comprehensible why Ildebaoth was regarded by most of them as the god of Moses, and was held as a proud, ambitious, and impure spirit who had abused his power by usurping the place of the highest god, though he was no better, and in some respects far worse than his brethren, Elohim. The latter representing the all-embracing, manifested deity only in their collectivity, since they were the fashioners of the first differentiations of the primary cosmic substance for the creation of the phenomenal universe. Therefore, Jehovah was called by the Gnostics the creator of, and one with, Ophiomorphos, the serpent, Satan, or evil. See Isis Unveiled, which we have done in its entirety. They taught that Turbo and Adonai were names of Yahovah, who is an emanation of Ildebaoth, Codex Nazareus. See Part 2, The Fallen Angels. This amounted, in their language, to saying what the rabbins expressed in a more veiled way, by stating that Cain had been generated by Samael, or Satan. The fallen angels are made in every ancient system the prototypes of fallen men, allegorically, and those men themselves, esoterically. Thus the Elohim of the hour of creation became the B'ni Elohim, the sons of God, among whom is Satan. In the Semitic traditions, war in heaven between Thyatonia and Azdidaka, the destroying serpent, ends on earth, according to Burnoff, in the battle of the pious men against the power of evil, of the Iranians with the Aryan Brahmins of India. And the conflict of the gods with the Asuras is repeated in the Great War, the Mahabharata, in the latest religion of all, Christianity. All the combatants, that's not the latest religion of all. Mohammedanism is, well, not even that. Scientology is now, but in this day and time it was Mohammedanism or Mormonism. One of the, well, I'm not sure if this was before John Smith made his little golden tablet lie. I think it was after. Anyway, in the latest religion of all, Christianity, all the combatants, gods and demons, adversaries in both the camps, are now transformed into dragons and satans, simply in order to connect evil, personified, with the serpent of Genesis, and thus prove the new dogma. Footnote. Vide for further details upon the satanic myth, Part 2 on symbolism in this volume. Noah was a kabir, hence he must have been a demon. It matters little whether it is Isis or Ceres, the Kabira, or against the Kabiri, who have taught men agriculture, but it is very important to prevent fanatics from monopolizing all the facts in history and legend, and from fathering their distortions of truth, history, and legend upon one man. Noah is either a myth, along with the others, or one whose legend was built upon the Kabiran or Titanic tradition, as taught in Samothrace. It was taken pretty much wholesale from the Sumerians. He has, therefore, no claim to be monopolized by either Jew or Christian. If, as Faber tried to demonstrate at such cost of learning and research, Noah is an Atlantean and a Titan, and his family are the Kabiri or pious Titans, etc., then biblical chronology falls by its own weight, and along with all the patriarchs, the antediluvian and pre-Atlantean Titans. As now discovered and proven, Cain is Mars, the god of power and generation, and of the first sexual bloodshed. Footnote 2, he is also Vulcan or Vulcane, the greatest god with the later Egyptians, and the greatest Kabir. The god of time was Shuim in Egypt, or Saturn, or Seth, and Shuim is the same as Cain. That does not link that to Mercury, right? I mean, I guess you can extrapolate that if you go into the Greek legends and try really hard, but no. Back to the text. Tubal Cain is a Kabir, an instructor of every artificer in brass or iron, or, if this will please better, he is one with Hephaestus or Vulcan. Jabal is taken from the Kabiri, instructors in agriculture, such as have cattle, and Jubal is the father of all those who handle the harp, he or they who fabricated the harp for Cronos and the trident for Poseidon. See Strabo comparing them to the Cyclops. The history or fables about the mysterious Telchines, fables echoing each and all the archaic events of our esoteric teachings, furnish us with a key to the origin of Cain's genealogy. Genesis chapter 3. They give the reason why the Roman Catholic Church identifies the accursed blood of Cain and Ham with sorcery, and makes it responsible for the deluge. Were not the Telchines, it is argued, the mysterious ironworkers of Rhodes? They who were the first to raise statues to the gods, furnished them with weapons and men with magic arts. And is it not they who were destroyed by a deluge at the command of Zeus, as the Cainites were by that of Jehovah? Were they? Were they destroyed, or were they condemned to walk the earth, and anybody that touched them was damned? Is that what happened? It seems like that was what happened. The Telchines are simply the Kabiri and the Titans in another form. They are the Atlanteans also. Like Lemnos and Samothrace, says Descartes, Rhodes, the birthplace of the Telchines, is an island of volcanic formation. Genie of Fire. The island of Rhodes emerged suddenly out of the seas after having been previously engulfed by the ocean, says the traditions. Like Samothrace of the Kabiri, it is connected in the memory of men with the flood legends. As enough has been said on this subject, however, it may be left for the present. But we may add a few more words about Noah, the Jewish representative of nearly every pagan god in one or another character. The Homeric songs contain, poeticized, all the later fables about the patriarchs, who are all sidereal, cosmic, and numerical symbols and signs. The attempt to disconnect the two genealogies, those of Seth and Cain, footnote 1. Nothing could be more awkward and childish, we say, than this fruitless attempt to disconnect the genealogies of Cain and Seth, or to conceal the identity of names under a different spelling. Thus, Cain has a son Enoch, and Seth a son Enoch also. Enos, Kanok, Hanok. What one may do, one may do what one likes with Hebrew unvoweled names. In the Cainite line, Enoch begets Arad, Arad Mahuel, the latter Methusael, and Methusael Lamech. In the Sethite line, Enoch begets Canaan, and this one Mahalalel, a variation of Mahalalel, who gives birth to Yered, or Irad, Yered to Enoch, number 3, who produces Methuselah from Methusael, and finally Lamech closes the list. We talked about this in the Bible study. Now, all these are symbols, Kabbalistically, of solar and lunar years, of astronomical periods, and of physiological, phallic functions, just as in any other pagan symbolical creed. This has been proven by a number of writers. Those of Seth and Cain, in a further attempt as futile to show them real historical men, has only led to more serious inquiries into the history of the past, and to discover which have damaged forever the supposed revelation. For instance, the identity of Noah and Melchizedek being established, the further identity of Melchizedek, or Father Sadiq, with Kronos Saturn is proved also. That is again something that is not there. I am quite interested in Melchizedek being initiated into it. Right? I am of the order of Melchizedek, if you are unaware. This is not what is in the Bible. It's just simply not. There is no reference to Melchizedek being Noah at all, in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. This is entirely an extrapolation. This is something by which I have spent a great deal of time researching. I have looked up almost every reference, and I say almost only because there's maybe some that I am unaware of Melchizedek ever being uttered in history. And it is not in context with Noah ever at all, not a single time. Abraham, yes. Noah, no. And it is for damn sure, like, it's not intimated that they met, but it is for sure that they were not the same person. 100%, 1000%, right? Melchizedek was the priest of Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem was not a Jewish city up until David conquered it, well after the establishment of the kingdom of Israel. And if any of that is confusing to you, once again, I refer you to the Bible study. You can ask questions, but I refer you to the Bible study because I have spent an extensive amount of time talking about these particular topics. That's why I did it, right? Quite literally why I did the Bible study. That it is so may be easily demonstrated. It was not denied by any of the Christian writers. Bryant, see Analysis of Ancient Mythology, concurs with all of those who are of the opinion that Sadiq, or Sadiq, was the patriarch Noah, as also Melchizedek. No. And that the name by which he is called, or Sadiq, corresponds to the character given of him in Genesis chapter 6:9. He was Sadiq, a just man and perfect in his generation. All science and every useful art were attributed to him, and through his sons transmitted to posterity. That is not Melchizedek. It just simply is not. I don't care that people tried to make it so. Once again, I don't care how long something's been written. I don't care who else has researched it. If I have done the research, I will stand on that shit. And that is one that I can absolutely stand up on. Now, it is Sanchoniathon who informs the world that the Kabiri were the sons of Sadiq, or Zadek, Melchizedek. True enough, this information, having descended to us through Eusebius, Preparatio Invel. Look at the fucking name of the book. Preparation for the Evangelica. Yeah, obviously he was what is the word? Not biased, right? It is obvious that he was not biased. He wasn't writing something that was directly related to evangelizing. May be regarded with a certain amount of suspicion, as it is more likely that he dealt with Sanchoniathon's works as he has with Manetho's synchronistic tables. But let us suppose that the identification of Sadiq, Kronos, or Saturn, with Noah and Melchizedek is based on one of Eusebian pious hypotheses. Let us accept it as such, along with Noah's characteristic as a just man and his supposed duplicate, the mysterious Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of the high God after his own order. And let's go ahead and point this out since we're already shitting upon Genesis. Noah was perfect and nor just and perfect in his ways, but yet what was the first thing after the flood and after the sacrifice? What happened? He went and got pissy drunk and passed out naked in his tent, right? And then, because he got pissy drunk and passed out naked in his tent, and one of his sons saw him and decided to cover him up, that son got cursed. Or not even the son that did it, but another son, right? He was perfect. Perfect guy. Just perfect. Fucking ridiculous. And finally, having seen what they all were spiritually, astronomically, physically, and cosmically, let us now see what they became rabbinically and Kabbalistically. Speaking of Adam, Cain, Mars, etc., as personifications, we find the author of The Source of Measures enunciating our very esoteric teachings in his Kabbalistic researches. Thus, he says, Now Mars was the lord of birth and death, of generation and destruction, of plowing and building, of sculpture, of stone cutting, of architecture, in fine, of all arts. He was the primeval principle, disintegrating into the modifications of two opposites for production. Astronomically, two, footnote, the Aeolian name of Mars was Arius, the Greek Ares. It is a name over the etymological significance of which philologists and Indianists, Greek and Sanskrit scholars, have vainly worked to this day. Very strangely, Max Muller connects both the names Mars and Ares with the Sanskrit root Mar, whence he traces their derivation, and from which, he says, the name of Marut, the storm god, comes. Welker, however, offers more correct etymologies. However it may be, etymologies of roots and words alone will never yield the esoteric meaning fully, though they may help to useful guesses. But those guesses is exactly why you got it wrong with Melchizedek. Astronomically, too, he held the birthplace of the day and year, the place of its increase of strength, Aries, and likewise the place of his death, Scorpio. He held the house of Venus, and that of the Scorpion. He, as birth was good, as death was evil. As good he was light, as bad he was night, as good he was man, as bad he was woman. He held the cardinal points, and as Cain, or Vulcan, footnote 2. As the same author shows, the very name Vulcane appears in the reading, for in the first words is to be found Velcane, or Vulcane, agreeably to the deepened U of the letter vowel. Out of its immediate context, it may be read as, and the god Cain, or Vulcane. If, however, anything is wanting to confirm the Cain-Vulcane idea, Fürst says, Cain, the iron point of a lance, a smith, blacksmith, inventor of sharp iron tools and smith work. And as Cain, or Vulcan, as Peter Sadiq, or Melchizedek, he was the lord of the ecliptic, or balance, or line of adjustment, and therefore was the just one. The ancients held that to there being 7 planets, or great gods, growing out of 8, and Peter Sadiq, the just or right one, was lord of the 8th, which was Mater Terra, source of measures. We're going to have to check out, we're going to have to check out the source of measures at some point too. This makes their functions plain enough after they had been degraded and establishes the identity. The Noachian deluge, as described in its dead letter and within the period of biblical chronology, having been shown to have never existed, the pious but very arbitrary supposition of Bishop Cumberland has but to follow that the deluge into land of fiction. Indeed, it seems rather fanciful to any impartial observer to be told that there were 2 distinct races of Kabiri, The first consisting of Ham and Mizraim, whom he conceives to be Jupiter and Dionysus of Menasius. The second, of the children of Shem, are the Kabiri of Sokonostion, while their father, Siddiq, was consequently the scriptural Shem. The Kabirim, the mighty ones, are identical with our primeval dying Kohans, with the corporeal and incorporeal Pitras, and with all the rulers and instructors of the primeval races, which are referred to as the gods and kings of the divine dynasties. The oldest Persian traditions about the polar and the submerged continents. Wait, that's the next section, right? Nope. Okay. Legendary lore could not distort facts so effectually as to reduce them to unrecognizable shape. Between the traditions of Egypt and Greece on the one hand, and Persia on the other, a country ever at war with the former, there is too great a similarity of figures and numbers to allow such coincidence to be due to simple chance. This was well proven by Bailey. Let us pause for a moment to examine these traditions from every available source, to compare the better those of the Magi with these so-called Grecian fables. Those legends have now passed into popular tales. The folklore of Persia, as many a real fiction, has found its way into our universal history. The stories of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table are also fairy tales to all appearance, yet they are based on facts and pertain to the history of England. Why should not the folklore of Iran be part and parcel of the history and the prehistoric events of Atlantis? That folklore says as follows. Before the creation of Adam, two races lived and succeeded each other on the earth, the Devs, who reigned 7,000 years, and the Paris, the Azeds, who reigned but 2,000 during the existence of the former. The Devs were giants, strong and wicked. The Peris were smaller in stature, but wiser and kinder. Here we recognize the Atlantean giants and the Aryans, or the Rakshasas of the Ramayana, and the children of Bharatavarsha, or India, the ante- and post-diluvians of the Bible. Gyan, or rather Gunan, true or occult wisdom and knowledge, also called Gyan bin Gyan, or wisdom, son of wisdom, was the king of the Paris. Footnote. Some derive from the word from Paras, which produced Pars, Persia. Pars, but it may be equally derived from Pitar or Pitras, the Hindu progenitors of the fifth race, the fathers of wisdom and the sons of will and yoga, who were called Pitar, as were the divine Pitars of the first race. It is important to note one thing that I do not often talk about, right? I have done a work where we went through who is the opposition in the book of Revelation, and it is Persia, right? It's not the Roman Catholic Church that is described as the beast. It is Persia, for many reasons that we have talked about now. That is through the iterations of Babylonia, Persia, and the various Mohammedan caliphates, right? We've dealt with that in some extensive detail. If it's confusing, I'll try to find the video for you. Let me know down below. It's part of the Bible study, though. You can definitely find it. It's part of Revelation. He had a shield as famous as that of Achilles, only instead of serving against an enemy in war, it served as a protection against black magic, the sorcery of the Devs. Gyan bin Gyan had reigned 2,000 years when Iblis, the devil, was permitted by God to defeat the Devs and scatter them to the other end of the world. Even the magic shield, which, produced on the principles of astrology, destroyed chants, charms, enchantments, and bad spells, could not prevail against Iblis, who was an agent of fate or karma. Footnote 2, but it is important to note that charms, enchantments, and bad spells do not really have a whole lot of power. Footnote 2. See for these traditions the collection of Persian legends in Russian, Georgian, Armenian, and Persian. Herbelot's narratives, Legends Persans, Bibliothèque Orientale, etc., and Danville's memoirs. We give in a condensed narrative that which is scattered in hundreds of volumes in European and Asiatic languages, as well as in oral traditions. They count 10 kings in their last metropolis called Canaan, and make their 10th, Chimerath, identical with the Hebrew Adam. These kings answer to the 10 antediluvian generations of kings as given by Berosus. Distorted as those legends are now found, one can hardly fail to identify them with the Chaldean, Egyptian, Greek, and even Hebrew traditions. The latter, disdaining in its exclusiveness to speak of pre-Adamite nations, yet allows these to be clearly inferred by sending out Cain, one of the 2 only living men on earth, into the land of Nod, where he gets married and builds a city. That is another one of those inconsistencies in Genesis. Now, if we compare the 9,000 years mentioned by the Persian tales with the 9,000 years which Plato declared had passed since the submersion of the last Atlantis, that is not true. A very strange fact is made apparent. This number right here is not fucking correct. Once again, this is misquoting Plato, which we have done. Part of the Ancient Lore playlist, you will find several of the works of Plato. Among them are Timaeus and Critias, which we did specifically to go back and look at Atlantis. And it was not 9,000, right? Well, I guess it was close to 9,000. Just disregard that. I'm thinking of the wrong reference point. That was me. I am wrong, right? It is around 9,000 years because it places it now about 12,000 years, and the math works out. So, but we did go back and look at that. So yes, it was 9,000 years. I was wrong, right? Publicly admit when you're wrong just as much as when you argue about things. I was wrong. But you definitely are welcome to go back to read, or let me read, Critias and Timaeus. Bailey remarked, but distorted it by his interpretation. The secret doctrine may restore the figures to their true meanings. First of all, we read in Critias that one must remember that 9,000 years have elapsed since the War of the Nations, which lived above and outside the Pillars of Hercules, and those which people the lands on this side. In Timaeus, Plato says the same. The secret doctrine, declaring that most of the latter islander Atlanteans, continental Atlanteans, perished in the interval between 850,000 and 700,000 years ago, and that the Aryans were 200,000 years old when the first great island, or continent, was submerged. There hardly seems to be any reconciliation possible between the figures. Yes, you are correct. There is no reconciliation possible between these two figures. You are entirely correct, Mrs. Blavatsky. There is no reconciliation possible between these two figures. The 9,000 years is based upon historical context. The 850,000 years is based upon numbers that you pulled out of your ass. That is not me being wrong. But there is, in truth. Plato, being an initiate, had to use the veiled language of the sanctuary, and so had the Magi of Chaldea and Persia. Those whose exoteric revelations the Persian legends were preserved and passed to posterity. Thus, one finds the Hebrews calling a week 7 days, and a week of years, when each of its days represents 360 solar years, and the whole week is 2,520 years in fact. They had a sabbatical week, a sabbatical year, etc., etc., and their Sabbath lasted indifferently 24 hours, or 24,000 years, in their secret calculations of the sods. We of present times call an age a century. They of Plato's day, the initiated writers at any rate, meant by a millennium, not 1,000, but 100,000 years. Only if you completely distort what the fucking word means, right? Milli literally means like it's literally 1,000, right? Not 100,000, but 1,000. Hindus, more independent than any, never conceal their chronology. Thus, when saying 9,000 years, the initiates will read 900,000 years. but that's not concealed, during which space of time, an example, from the first appearance of the Aryan race, when the Pliocene portions of the once great Atlantis began gradually sinking. Footnote. The main continent perished in the Miocene times as already stated, and you are wrong. Right? It astounds me, right? You can make the reference that maybe the things that were listed 850,000 years ago were not Atlantis, right? You can make that argument, but you cannot make the argument that this one place that we have one example of was misrepresented because it doesn't fit your narrative, right? Like, it is quite literal in the text, right? He says, I got this from Solon, who got it from his uncle, who got it from the priest in Egypt. Directly, right? It is a fourth remove, but it is recorded as a first-person account, right? This is what my uncle told me that he learned in Egypt, basically. And it is quite explicit. He talks about there being 10 kingdoms, that it is still a continent, and that it disappeared under the water in a single day. Not gradually sinking at all. Not isolated down to a single island at all. There is no reference at all to that happening whatsoever in the entirety of the whole reference that we have to Atlantis. This is entirely not contained within what is stated quite plainly in the original text. In order to believe this, you have to completely disregard what was recorded. Back to the text. The once great Atlantis began gradually sinking, and other continents to appear on the surface, down to the final disappearance of Plato's small island of Atlantis, again, completely misrepresenting what is directly stated in the text that you are quoting. The Aryan races had never ceased to fight with the descendants of the first giant races. This war lasted till nearly the close of the age which preceded the Kali Yuga, which was the Mahabharatian war so famous in Indian history. Such blending of the events and epochs and the bringing down of hundreds of thousands into thousands of years does not interfere with the numbers of years that had elapsed, according to the statement made by the Egyptian priest of Solon, since the destruction of the last portion of Atlantis. That is not what is recorded, though. You are literally misquoting. The 9,000 years were the correct figures given. The latter event has never been kept a secret and had only faded out of memory of the Greeks. The Egyptians had their records complete, because isolated. For, being surrounded by sea and desert, they had been left untrammeled by other nations, till about a few millenniums before our era. They were once a savanna and not a desert. History, for the first time, catches a glimpse of Egypt and its great mysteries through Herodotus, if we do not take into account the Bible and its queer chronology. Footnote 2. From Bede downward, all the chronologists of the Church have differed among themselves and contradicted each other. The chronology of the Hebrew text has been grossly altered, especially in the interval next after the deluge, says Whiston. And how little Herodotus could tell is confessed by himself when speaking of a mysterious tomb of an initiate at Sais, in one sacred precinct of Minerva. There, he says, behind the chapel is the tomb of one whose name I consider it impious to divulge. In the enclosure stands a large obelisk, and there is a lake near, surrounded with a stone wall formed in a circle. In this lake they perform by night that person's adventures, which they call mysteries. On these matters, however, though I am accurately acquainted with the particulars of them, I must observe a discreet silence. On the other hand, it is well to know that no secret was so well preserved and so sacred with the ancients as that of their cycles and computations. From the Egyptians down to the Jews, it was held as the highest sin to divulge anything pertaining to the correct measure of time. It was for divulging the secrets of the gods that Tantalus was plunged into the infernal regions. The keepers of the sacred Sibylline books were threatened with the death penalty for revealing a word from them. Sigillians, images from Harpocrates, were in every temple, especially in those of Isis and Serapis, each pressing a finger to the lips. While the Hebrews taught that to divulge, after initiation into the rabbinical mysteries, the secrets of Kabbalah was like eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and it was punishable by death. Because that's what happened when they did the tree of knowledge. They weren't expelled, they were killed. And yet, we Europeans accepted the exoteric chronology of the Jews. What wonder that it has influenced and colored ever since all of our conceptions of science and the duration of things. The Persian traditions, then, are full of two nations or races, now entirely extinct, as some think, whereas they are only transformed. They are ever speaking of and describing the mountains of Kaf, Kafaristan, which contains a gallery built by the giants Argeek, wherein the statues of ancient men under all their forms are preserved. They call them Suleimans, Solomons, or the wise kings of the East, and count 72 kings of that name. Footnote. Thence, King Solomon, whose traces are nowhere to be found outside of the Bible, and the descriptions of whose magnificent palace and city dovetail with those of the Persian tales, though they were unknown to all pagan travelers, even to Herodotus. I am unfamiliar with whether this is true or not, but King Solomon was definitely not somebody to emulate either. 3 among them reigned for 1,000 years each. Siamek, the beloved son of Chimerath, Adam, their first king, died murdered by his giant brother. The father had a perpetual fire preserved on the tomb which contained his cremated ashes. Hence, the origin of fire worship, as some Orientalists think. We got a different explanation for that, too. Then came Hushink, the prudent and the wise. It was his dynasty which rediscovered metals and precious stones, which had been concealed by the devs or giants in the bowels of the earth. How to make brasswork, to cut canals, and improve agriculture. As usual, it is Hushink, again, who is credited with having written the work called Eternal Wisdom, and even with having built the cities of Luz, Babylon, and Isfahan, though they were built ages later. But as modern Delhi is built on 6 other older cities, so these just named cities may be built on emplacements of other cities of an immense antiquity. As to its date, it can only be inferred from another legend. Babylon is one of the original cities according to the Bible. In the same tradition, that wise prince is credited with having made war against the giants on a 12-legged horse, whose birth is attributed to the amours of a crocodile with a female hippopotamus. This dodecaped was found on the Dry Island, or New Continent. Much force and cunning had to be used to secure the wonderful animal, but no sooner had Hushunk mounted him than he defeated every enemy. No giants could withstand his tremendous power. Notwithstanding, this king of kings was killed by an enormous rock thrown at him by the giants from the great mountains of Damavend. Footnote. Oriental traditions. Tamarath is the 3rd king of Persia, the St. George of Iran, the knight who always has the best of and who kills the dragon. He is the great enemy of the Devs, who, in his day, dwelled in the mountains of Kaf, and occasionally made raids on the Paris. The old French chronicles of the Persian folklore call him the Devbend, the conqueror of the giants. He, too, is credited with having founded Babylon, Nineveh, Diarbek, etc., etc. Like his grandsire Hushink, Tamariz, also had his steed, only far more rare and rapid, a bird called Samurganki, a marvelous bird in truth, intelligent and polyglot, and even very religious. What says that Persian phoenix? It complains of its old age, for it is born, cycles and cycles, before the days of Adam, also Chimerath. It has witnessed the revolutions of long centuries. It has seen the birth and the close of 12 cycles of 7,000 years each, which multiplied esoterically will give us again 840,000 years. And the 7,000 years might be correct, but it is probably not. Footnote 2. See the 12,000 year disaster cycle. Footnote 2. Remember that the rabbins teach that there are to be 7 successive renewals of the globe and that each will last 7,000 years, the total duration being thus 49,000 years. See Rabbi Parker's Wheel and Kennelly's Book of God. This refers to 7 rounds, 7 root races and sub-races, the truly occult figures, though sorely confused. Simorg is born with the last deluge of the pre-Adamites, says the Romance of Simorg and the God Caliph, Tales of Revenge. What says the Book of Numbers? Esoterically, Adam Rishon is the lunar spirit, Jehovah in a sense or the Petrus, and his 3 sons, Cain, Abel, and Seth, represent the 3 races as already explained. Noah Zeuthus represents in his turn, in the cosmogeological key, the 3rd race separated, and his sons its last 3 races. Ham, moreover, symbolizing that race which uncovered the nakedness of the parent race. He was the one that covered the nakedness, and of the mindless, in example, committed sin. Tamaranth visits on his winged steed, Araman, the mountains of Kulkaf or Kaf. He finds there the Parasail treated by the giants and slays Argon and the giant Demrushk. Then he liberates the good Pari, Margiana, footnote, Mergain or Morgana, the fairy sister of King Arthur, as thus shown of Oriental descent. Just because the names are similar does not mean that it is necessarily the same source. It can be, but that is again speculation. Then he liberates the good Pari, Margiana, whom Darush had kept as a prisoner, and takes her over to the dry island, an example of the new continent of Europe. Footnote 2. Where we find her indeed in Great Britain, in the romance of the Knights of the Round Table. Whence the identity of name and fairyhood, if both heroines did not symbolize the same historical event which had passed into a legend. I contend that the dry continent, the dry island, would probably be Saharan Egypt, or Saharan Africa. After him came Gemeshid, who builds Issakhar, or Persepolis. This king reigns 700 years and believes himself in his great pride immortal, and demands divine honors. Fate punishes him, and he wanders 100 years in the world under the name of Dulakarnayan, the Two-Horned. But this epithet has no connection with the Two-Horned Gentleman of the Cloven Foot. The Two-Horned is the epithet given in Asia, uncivilized enough to know nothing of the attributes of the devil, to those conquerors who have subdued the world from the east to the west. Then came the usurper, Zohak, and Feridan, one of the Persian heroes, who vanquishes the former and shuts him up in the mountains of Damavend. These are followed by many others down to Kaikobad, who founded a new dynasty. Such is the legendary history of Persia, and we have to analyze it. What are the mountains of Kaf to begin with? Whatever they may be in their geographical status, whether they are the Caucasian or Central Asian mountains, it is far beyond these mountains to the north that legends places the Devs and the Paris. The latter, the remote ancestors of the Parsis or Farsis. Oriental tradition is ever referring to an unknown glacial, gloomy sea, and to a dark region, within which, nevertheless, are situated the Fortunate Islands, wherein bubbles from the beginning of life on earth, the fountain of life. But the legend asserts, moreover, that a portion of the first dry island continent, having detached itself from the main body, had remained, since then, beyond the mountains of Koakaf, the stony girdle that surrounds the world. A journey of 7 months' duration will bring him who is possessed of Solomon's ring to that fountain if he keeps on journeying north straight before him as the bird flies. Journeying therefore from Persia straight north will bring one along the 60th degree of longitude, holding to the west as to Nova Zembla, and from the Caucasus to the eternal ice beyond the Arctic Circle, would land one between 60 and 45 degrees of longitude, or between Nova Zembla and Spitsbergen. This, of course, if one has the dodecapedian horse of Hushink, or the winged Samorg of Tamarath, or Tamaras, upon which to cross over the Arctic Ocean. Footnote. To this day, the aborigines of Caucasus speak of their mountains as Kafkas, using the consonant P instead of the usual V. But their bards say that it requires 7 months for a swift horse to reach the dry land beyond Kaf, holding north without ever deviating from one's way. Nevertheless, the wandering songsters of Persia and the Caucasus will remain, to this day, that far beyond the snow-capped summits of Kap or Caucasus, there is a great continent now concealed from all. That is reached by those who secure the services of the 12-legged progeny of the crocodile and the female hippopotamus, whose legs become at will 12 wings. Footnote 2. Bailey thought he saw in this horse a 12-oared ship. The secret doctrine teaches that the early Third Race built boats and flotillas before it built houses. But the horse, though a much later animal, has, nevertheless, a more primitive occult meaning. The crocodile and the hippopotamus were held sacred and represented divine symbols, both with the ancient Egyptians and with the Mexicans. Poseidon is, in Homer, the god of the horse, and assumes that form himself to please Ceres. Arion, their progeny, is one of the aspects of that horse, which is a cycle, whose legs become at will 12 wings, or by those who have the patience to wait for the good pleasure of Samorganki, who promised that before she dies she will reveal the hidden continent to all, and make it once more visible and within easy reach, by means of a bridge which the ocean devs will build between that portion of the dry island and its severed parts. Footnote 3. The severed parts must be Norway or the other lands in the neighborhood of the Arctic Circle. Sure, just randomly. This relates, of course, to the seventh race, Samorg being the Manvantaric cycle. It is very curious that Cosmas Indicopleustes, who lived in the 6th century A.D., should have always maintained that man was born and first dwelt in a country beyond the ocean, a proof of which has been given him in India by a learned Chaldean. He says, "The lands we live in are surrounded by the ocean, but beyond that ocean there is another land which touches the walls of the sky, and it is in this land that man has created and lived in paradise. During the deluge, Noah was carried in his ark into the land of his posterity now inhabits. The 12-legged horse of Hushink was found on that continent named the Dry Island. The Christian topography of Cosmas Indicopleustes and its merits are well known, but here the good father repeats a universal tradition, now, moreover, corroborated by facts. Every Arctic traveler suspects a continent or a dry island beyond the line of eternal ice. Perhaps now the meaning of the following passage from one of the commentaries may become clearer. In the beginnings of life, human life, the only dry land was on the right end. Footnote. The two poles are called the right and left ends of our globes, the right being the North Pole or the head and feet of the earth. Every beneficent, astral and cosmic action comes from the north. Every lethal influence from the South Pole. They are much connected with and influence right and left-hand magic, which I have a different definition of than they do. The only dry land was on the right end of the sphere, where it, the globe, is motionless. Footnote 2. That would be the poles, right? That is the closest to motionless that you will find. Not that it is actually motionless. Footnote 2. The more one approaches the poles, the less rotation is felt, at the poles proper, the diurnal revolution is quite neutralized. Thence the expression that the sphere is motionless. The whole earth was one vast watery desert, and the waters were tepid. There man was born on the 7 zones of the immortal, the indestructible of the Manvantara. Footnote 3. It is averred in occultism that the land or island which crowns the North Pole like a skull cap is the only one which prevails during the whole Manvantara of our round. All the central continents and lands will emerge from the sea bottom many times in turn, but this land will never change. There was an eternal spring in darkness, but that which is darkness of the man of today was light to the man of his dawn. There the gods rested, and Fohat, footnote 4. Bear in mind that the Vedic and Avestian name of Fohat is Apamnapat. In the Avesta, he stands between the fire Yazatas and the water Yazatas. The literal meaning is son of the Watas, but these Watas are not the liquid we know, but ether, the fiery waters of space. Fohat is the son of ether in its highest aspect. Akasa, the mother-father of the primitive 7 and of sound or logos. Again, refer to my definition of logos for a better understanding. Fohat is indeed logos. Fohat is the light of the latter. See Book 1. And Fohat reigns ever since. Thus the wise fathers say that a man is born in the head of his mother, Earth, and that her feet at the left end generated, begot, the evil winds that blow from the mouth of the lower dragon. Between the first and second races, the eternal central land was divided by the waters of life. Footnote 5. This water is the blood or fluid of life which animates the earth, compared here to a living body. It flows around and animates her, Mother Earth's, body. Its one end issues from her head. It becomes foul at her feet, the southern pole. It gets purified on its return to her heart, which beats under the foot of the sacred Shambhala, which then, in the beginning, was not yet born. For it is in the belt of man's dwelling, the earth, that lies concealed the life and health of all that lives and breathes. Footnote 6. Occult teaching corroborates this popular tradition, which asserts the existence of a fountain of life in the bowels of the earth and in the North Pole. It is the blood of the earth, the electromagnetic current which circulates through all the arteries and which is to be found stored in the navel of the earth. We will talk briefly. Right. I have a different interpretation, and this is purely speculation, right? If it is talking about it flows around her body without saying Mother Earth, it can be talking about your body as well. It issues from one end, and it becomes foul at her feet is another understanding of a concept, right? There are 2 sources of energetic interpolation, right? You can take these energies and work with them. One is white. It is penetrative. It is generative. That means that it penetrates and it generates. The other one is black. It is absorptive and nurturing. That means that it absorbs and it nurtures. That is light and dark, right? They meet in the middle, not quite at the navel, but instead at the heart. The better interpretation of this would probably be what I say. That is not to say that that is exactly correct, but it flows around and animates her is your chakra, right? There is a divine chakra, the 8th one, which you have access to. You have 7 internal, which is all of these 7 globes, and 1 external, which is the 8th. That is the part that differentiates you from others, right? It is your personal space, so to speak. It is generated by your heart through your other chakras. So you absorb this, you absorb this, you meet them together in the middle, and then together they form your aura, your 8th divine chakra. That is a better understanding of this to me than what she is saying. And if that is something that you are interested in, fall back to the beginning of the Esoterica playlist, which this video is part of, or check out my book, which is linked in the box down below. During the first and second races, the belt was covered with the great waters, but the Great Mother travailed under the waves, and a new land was joined with the first one, which our wise men call the headgear, the cap. She travailed harder for her third race, and her waist and navel appeared above the water. It was the belt, the sacred Himavat, which stretches around the world. Footnote. Occultism points to the Himalayan chain as that belt, and maintains that whether under the water or above, it encircles the globe. No, not really. The navel is described as situated to the setting sun, or to the west of the Himavat, in which lies the roots of Meru. Which mountain is north of the Himalaya? Meru is not the fabulous mountain in the navel or center of the earth, but its roots and foundations are in that navel, though it is in the far north itself. This connects it with the central land that never perishes, the land in which the day of the mortal lasts 6 months and his night another 6 months, as the Vishnu Purana has it. For the north of Meru there is, therefore, always night during day in other regions, for Meru is north of all the Dweepas and Varshas, islands and countries. Meru is therefore neither on Atlas, as Wilford suggests, nor, as Wilson's tried to show, absolutely in the center of the globe, only because, relatively with the inhabitants of the several portions, to whom all of the east is that quarter where the sun first appears. Right. She broke towards the setting sun from her neck. Footnote 2. Even the commentaries do not refrain from oriental metaphor. The globe is likened to the body of a woman, Mother Earth. From her neck downward means from the inland sea, now beyond the impassable barrier of ice. There is no impassable barrier of ice, just in case you were curious. The earth, as Parasara says, is the mother and nurse, augmented by all the creatures and their qualities, the comprehender of all the worlds. Broke towards the setting sun from her neck downward to the southwest, into many lands and islands, but the eternal land, the cap, broke not asunder. Dry lands covered the face of the silent waters to the 4 sides of the world. All these perished in their turn. Then appeared the abode of the wicked, the Atlantis. The eternal land was now hid, for the waters became solid, frozen, under the breath of her nostrils and the evil winds from the dragon's mount, etc., etc. And for an understanding of that, we will refer once again to the 12,000-year disaster cycle, where I fully maintain that Antarctic and the Arctic were once equatorial. This shows that northern Asia is as old as the second race. One may even say that Asia is contemporary with man, since from the very beginnings of human life its root continent, so to speak, already existed, that part of the world now known as Asia being only cut off from it in a later age and divided by glacial waters. If then the teaching is understood correctly, the first continent which came into existence capped over the whole North Pole like one unbroken crust, and remains so to this day. Beyond that inland sea, which seems like an unreachable mirage to the few Arctic travelers who perceive it. During the second race, more land emerged from under the waters as a continuation of the head from the neck, beginning on both hemispheres, on the line above the most northern part of Spitsbergen, footnote 3. For the stanzas called this locality by the term translated in the commentary as a place of no latitude, Niraksha, the abode of the gods, as the scholalyst says from the Surya Siddhanta. Above this, the Siddha, goes the sun when situated at the equinoxes. They have neither equinoctial shadows nor elevation at the pole. In both directions these are the 2 pole stars, fixed in the midst of the sky. To those who are situated in places of no latitude, both these have their place in the horizon. Hence there is, on that land, no elevation of the poles, the 2 pole stars being situated on the horizon, but the degrees of co-latitude are 90. At Meru, the degrees of latitude are of the same number. the northern part of Spitsbergen, on Mercator's projection on our side. It may have included on the American side the localities that are now occupied by Baffin's Bay and the neighboring islands and promontories. There, it hardly reached southward the 70th degree of latitude. Here, it formed the horseshoe continent of which the commentary speaks, of the two ends of which one included Greenland, with a prolongation which crossed the 50th degree a little southwest, and the other Kamchatka, the two ends being united by what is now the northern fringe of the coast of eastern and western Siberia. This broke asunder and disappeared in the early part of the third race. Lemuria was formed. When it was destroyed in its turn, Atlantis appeared. And that is going to bring us to the end of the origin of the Satan myth. Now, hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. It is important to correct yourself when you're wrong, right? And that is why I did so loudly. But it is also important to maintain speculation as opposed to things that we know. We do know many of the things that are contained in here, but they are couched in ways that are not conclusive, right? The stories that she tells of Atlantis are in direct contradiction to what is recorded of Atlantis. Now, you can make the supposition that this thing over here is talking about this thing over here, but if it is not a direct correlation, then you've got a problem, right? That was why I jumped on the 9,000 thing so fast, was because everything that she says about Atlantis is contradictory to everything that is recorded about Atlantis. That is an enormous problem, right? If you are putting forward a theory, you have to at least comport with the source material. You can make extrapolations, you just cannot say that they are factual. I make a lot of extrapolations. The 12,000 year disaster cycle is an extrapolation. Now, it's not entirely my own, but it is one that I believe in, but I will still maintain it's speculative, right? Despite the fact that there are several scientific discoveries which lean directly into it. None of them prove it, and so it is speculative. Most of the things I talk about, when I talk about them speculatively, is because it is not something proven. Now, that comes down as far as I have healed myself through the use of magic. I believe that, but I still hold that it is speculative. There can be another explanation for it, but it didn't start until I started. It didn't change until I did the things. But until somebody else does the same things and gets the same result, it's got to be speculation, even though I have like literal physical manifestations of it. This is a good study, right? There's a lot of information in here, and some of it is a little bit useful, but most of it is speculative. Most of it is, I believe these things, and let me explain why I believe them, and that is perfectly fine. But there is no ice wall, right? That is not a thing. There are glaciers, they're tall, they're not an ice wall. That is a different type of thing. The Earth is not flat, it is a globe. The ice wall is part of the flat Earth theory. The impassable wall. We can climb a glacier. We've done it, right? That is a thing that has happened. Those glaciers are, some of them, no longer existent. That means that it wasn't a barrier, right? It wasn't an intentionally placed barrier to keep humanity from exploring past this. If so, we would not be able to surmount it. We have surmounted them. Most of the glaciers, like there are still glaciers now at the equator. How did they get there? Again, the 12,000 year disaster cycle. But it's speculative. These are things we speculate about. If you like what I'm doing, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that was stated. Put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is a different work that you would like to see me read or discuss, drop that in the box down below as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Check out a membership or pick up a copy of my book. To the crew, Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.